What's a good word, everyone? It's your boy DKB here. I just want to say thanks for all the support. The channel's been steadily growing, and the number you see below, you can drop a text, shoot a voicemail, any ideas, topics, collabs, etc. you guys want to see. I'll include them in future videos and live streams, and I'll catch you again. Be easy. What's the good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here. We're talking about our 4th round draft pick today in Arian Smith. Recapping what's gone down in OTAs, minicamp, and of course going through a bit of a training camp preview here. And Arian Smith was probably the most talked about player on the entire roster, and that's considering Garrett Wilson's breakout. That's considering how well Mason Taylor has acquitted himself so far during camp. And that's even considering the praise that Armand Mimbu has received as well, right? So this went from a controversial draft pick, right? You're talking about a player that was shot down, labeled a bust immediately, and a huge reach to suddenly this is a guy that can make an impact in year one for us, and one beyond just being the 4th or 5th receiver in the rotation. Now, with him, things start off in two places. One, Aaron Glenn. I think Sean Jefferson might have lightly mentioned this in an article I've seen, but of course all of the beat writers as well, Rich Cimini, Zach Rosenblatt, you look at Nick Faria, for example, and everybody has put out there that not only is the speed easy to see, and the guy's an immediate separator, as well as being able to leave you in the dust behind him, but Nick Faria specifically also highlighted a ton that he's often open, right? Now, again, I don't know if this means he's just beating people cleanly off the line of scrimmage, etc. We know with OTAs, there's not a lot of physicality from the DBs. There's not often a lot of, if any, press coverage, etc. allowed. And we know with the build that he has, being a little bit slender, even though he is 6 foot, about 190 pounds, that's something that could knock him off his game. So it's great to see that is happening during OTAs. You hope it keeps up during training camp for sure, but Chris Banjo also has talked about adding on to his plate. It wasn't just enough to see if he can improve the hands, which Aaron Glenn did call out as well pretty early on within the practices, but Chris Banjo highlighted the fact that they're looking to implement him on special teams, right? Specifically as a returner, and it looks like more specifically as a punt returner, which means he'll also be challenging Xavier Gibson, in addition to someone like Jamal Pritchett, the UDFA, adding to that competition as well. So Chris Banjo did speak pretty highly about it, especially since it would be a first for Arian Smith. He hasn't done it at Georgia whatsoever, and I would assume that rings true for high school. But it's something added onto his plate, and according to Chris Banjo, it sounds like it's going relatively well, considering whatever the learning curve looks like for a first-time special teams player. So now you're talking about not only being able to get him onto the field as a returner, but adding to the allure of the Deshaun Jackson comps that we've been getting since OTAs kicked off, and since Arian Smith has been catching balls left and right, making huge plays, etc. And it's the obvious connection. He's smaller. He brings this elite version of speed, and if he can lock in a return role, then essentially you're looking at a carbon copy of someone like Deshaun Jackson from a athleticism standpoint, right? There's a reason why Deshaun Jackson has done so well in the NFL, and it's not just because he has speed. He was a guy that was able to utilize it, but even the background's a little similar, right? Deshaun Jackson was known to be an elite returner in college, which also separates him a bit from Arian Smith here, but he was also a guy that ended up having a case of some drops and stuff, and not to the level that Arian Smith has. Let's not forget, I want to say he led college football with 10 drops last year, but he had something like an insane, somewhere between like a 24 and a 33% drop rate, or something astronomical. But with OTAs kicking off, with him having some good wins against another rookie that we just talked about, in Azareye'h Thomas, for example, and really I would say one of the highlights is that through multiple practices, it was called out that he didn't have a single drop that beat writers or the coaching staff was able to point to or call out. Now, I know one or two did happen by the time, we wrapped things up a couple weeks ago, but ultimately, he really resolved the issue about the hands question right out of the gate. Now, we want to continue to see it. Again, physicality is going to turn up. We're going to be asking these rookies and the vets to do a lot more once training camp kicks off, and Aaron Glenn has already talked about the intensity rising. But still, this is a guy that immediately hits the jugs machine, immediately is seeing his ability to look the ball in, secure the ball, and ultimately make the catch over OTAs, and it would be hard pressed to say that you see that out of anyone else, or out of many players at the very least, right? And one of the last things I talked about, I want to say maybe a week or two potentially after we drafted Arian Smith, and I was doing my breakdowns of the draft class, was that Arian Smith was a guy that was a two-sport athlete, and really is a guy you could probably throw into Olympic conversations in terms of what he can do on the track. But because he's playing two sports at a high level, because there's going to be a ton of wear and tear, and of course he had players ahead of him within that offense as well that would have took away from opportunities prior to 2024, he never fully focused in on football, right? If anything, you can make the argument that prior to 2024, a lot more of his ability and a lot more of his focus probably went to track and field. And so now that he's specifically focusing in on football, you're seeing the early benefits and him reaping the rewards of being able to just hone in on one thing and start to really perfect the craft of football in and of itself, right? That means more attention to detail in releases, more attention to detail in route breaks, more attention to detail in stems at the top of your route when you're talking about verticality, how to utilize speed, right? Speed transitions, being able to rock a guy to sleep, or when it looks like you're coasting and then just take off, is a skill in and of itself. And then, of course, the technique of actually catching the ball. And that was one of the things that I also brought up. I didn't like a comment he made before that their catching isn't necessarily a skill, or maybe something along the lines of there isn't an actual technique to it, which speaks to just kind of how aloof he was about the whole thing. But ultimately, when you look at him going into training camp, this is a guy that created so much buzz by the time OTAs wrapped up that you started seeing articles come out that he could surprisingly become a competitor to be the number 2 receiver in this offense, next to Garrett Wilson. And to be honest, anytime you can get a speed guy on the field that you actually trust to be able to go out there and catch the ball, it's a dynamic change. A speed guy that can't catch in and of itself does a ton, because it forces defense to have to account for him, and not just going deep, but at all 3 levels, right? You don't want a guy that catches a screen or he's catching a slant and he's taking off of you because you roll coverage away from wherever he potentially would have broken free or shaken a tackle or 2 off. So you're committing realistically 2 to 3 players consistently when you have a guy like this on the field. Then you talk about the fact that Garrett Wilson is going to be a lead in one-on-one coverage, and you add to the fact that Mason Taylor has the makings of an early security blanket that Justin Fields can trust. And obviously we talked about the tight end connection and Justin Fields' arm and his ability to actually make good and connect on some of these deep plays. Things are really lining up for Arian Smith. And so if he does become number 2, right, let's play devil's advocate. If he becomes number 2, it's an immediate excellent sign. Obviously, things in training camp went really well. He beat out 3 veterans. Aaron Glenn's not going to shy away from playing these guys. And Tanner Engstrom clearly has a blueprint, at least in terms of how he utilized Jameson Williams, to figure out how to put him into this offense. If he doesn't, let's say he ends up becoming the starting slot receiver, or even if he remains as a wide receiver 4 or wide receiver 5 and he has to try to work his way up, if he sees the field, there's a solid chance that as long as he plays the entire season, and let's just say he gets 10 to 17, I know it's an odd number, snaps per game, he at any point in time could have a weird stat line where he produces, 2 catches, 46 yards, 2 touchdowns, right? Essentially 2 big enough plays. And maybe he adds to that with, 2 or 3 rushes and he picks up, 36 yards or something like that on the ground. Or maybe he breaks one free and adds a touchdown, etc. If you could get that once a quarter, right? Like once every 4 to 5 games, you still walk away feeling really good, right? You're talking about maybe a somewhere between a 400 and 500 yard season, maybe somewhere between 4 and 6 touchdowns, which would be huge. And you also got a guy that contributed for you on the ground, in addition to potentially working out as a returner for you as well. And so as a rookie, again, one that had a lot of disdain around where he was drafted. Even if you threw him in the 5th round, I think there'd be some concerns. But the farther back you go, the more comfortable I think people would have been. Things are in place for Arian Smith to be able to make more noise in his rookie season than expected. And part of that is just that we didn't go out there and throw money at a big free agent receiver or look for a big trade or anything. And the other part of it is just trusting in the ability for some of these guys to get schemed up, in addition to developing the skill sets as the season progressed. So I'm really excited for Arian Smith just because he does seem like the dark horse of this draft class in terms of he could have a extremely huge role or he could have more of a minimal one, but one that can cause a big impact for him every time he steps onto the field. So let me know what you guys ultimately think. I walk away, just as we wrap up here real quick, I walk away saying I don't know what else he could have done other than have a perfect offseason of 0 drops, to not impress anybody. I mean, if you're still being critical right now, and yes, take everything with a grain of salt. We already talked through training camps coming up. Let's see if he still looks as good. But for what's allowed and what he has control of, he's done everything essentially as well as possibly as it could possibly go for him. So again, let me know what you guys think. I'll catch you guys again. Peace.